Hello, everyone. Hope everybody is enjoying this beautiful day. Where I am today, it is sunny and it is fabulous to see the sun, but it's freezing cold. But still, it's gorgeous and crisp, and I'm just loving this weather, I have to say. Quite nice to see that bright sun today. So today, I thought I would give a little talk about, a foundational piece of gut health, and that is probiotics. Probiotics are something that anybody who is on a gut health journey knows about and hopefully is incorporating into, your regime to support your microbiome of the gut and to, help you get rid of all of your terrible digestive symptoms, the gas and the bloating, IBS symptoms, things like that. They're a key strategy and something that's really needed if you are doing anything to support your digestion and your gut health. So basically, we're going to talk about probiotics. I mean, really what they are, right? Probiotics are essentially foods or supplements that contain live microorganisms. And these microorganisms, are used to support your own microbiome, right? So the microbiome, as I'm sure you all know, but I'll just give you a quick overview just in case you don't. Microbiome is, the trillions of microorganisms that live inside your gut. They're found inside your bodies, but for our purposes, we focus on the gut microbiome because that's what we're working on. And basically, the bacterial cells in the microbiome are considered your good bacteria, right? They do a lot of things inside the gut. The different roles they play are too many to list, too many to count, and too many to even know about in this day and age. There's so much research going on right now about what the microbiome does. Sorry, a bit of sun in my eyes here. About what the microbiome does and the different roles in your health and, the different disease processes that go on. They are related in so many different ways. But basically, we can look at things like the microbiome supporting immune function, enhancing digestion, nutrient breakdown, nutrient absorption. They aid in the synthesis of key neurotransmitters and other compounds like different vitamins and things like that in our systems. Probiotics really are used to boost this microbial population that we have inside our body. Really, they do so many things that are important to how we function day to day. I've got notes here so I don't miss any of the main points that I want to cover. But basically, they are responsible for, digestion and absorption of nutrients, as I had mentioned. They produce vitamin B12, butyrate, vitamin K, vitamin K2, a whole bunch of different things that we need for the functioning of our body. The microbiome basically helps to crowd out bad microbes that can also, be detrimental to our health. So when you've got a big, strong, healthy population in your microbiome, it helps kind of edge out the bad guys that are trying to take over and you're trying to grow unencumbered. When you've got a really strong microbiome, you keep those bad guys in check, right? The bad guys are needed, right? We all have some pathogenic microbes in our microbiome, but they are necessary. They really kind of force our microbiome to maintain its strength and maintain its integrity. And you've all heard me say this a million times, but I like to think of it like an army. And if you've got an army that's sitting around with no enemy to be vigilant for, so, the army can get lazy and unmotivated and, get pretty, weak. But if there's an enemy, lurking in the background, that army's got to stay vigilant and strong and it's always on its guard. So that's kind of the way you can look at your own microbiome. You can look at it as an army that's, reacting against the pathogens that naturally live with it. And usually living in harmony, right? The good guys are more in number and they're stronger and they keep the bad guys in check, right? The microbiome also creates enzymes that help destroy the pathogens and any invaders that do come in that we don't want to have there or in big numbers. It produces these enzymes that help to destroy those harmful bacteria as well. Also, the microbiome can stimulate the secretion of different parts of our immune system. So the microbiome is a key piece of immunity. So, they do so many different things, right? So we'll get into a little bit more of those as we go through the ways we can build up our microbiome through probiotics. So probiotics, or, our microbiomes, we can use them almost interchangeably, really. They're in our systems from the moment we're born. So when a newborn, is born and comes through the birth canal of the mother, it becomes exposed to the mother's bacteria for the first time, and this is how it begins to build up its own population. But babies who are not born vaginally and are born by C-section, they don't get this kind of inoculation with the good bacteria, but then they begin to pick up bacteria from their environment. Nursing mothers really have a bonus because that's another great way that they can build up the baby's microbiome. But basically, this inoculation with bacteria after birth is kind of what sets us up for the rest of our lives, and depends, on what our microbiome is made of and how strong that it is. Also, historically, people have really been inoculated with bacteria through the ways that they have eaten, right? Eating fresh foods from good soils and fermenting foods to keep them from spoiling. That was something else traditionally that was very often done in different societies. And that was another way that people got exposed to good bacteria. But today, on the other hand, we live in a very different world, and because of things like refrigeration and different agricultural processes, we soak our foods in chlorine, and we, they are, irradiated to get rid of bacteria, things like that. Much of our food now contains little or no probiotics, and that's all in the name of sanitation practices, right? So many foods today, even contain dangerous antibiotics that can kill off the bacteria that are already inside us. So that really lets you know how important it is for us to support our microbiomes and use probiotics, whether in foods or supplements or both, to kind of build up and nurture the microbiome that we do have and protect it from all these outside influences that can really, really affect it in a negative way. So there's many health benefits for probiotics. The big one that we're concerned with is digestive health, right? They're so beneficial in the treatment and prevention of all sorts of gut disorders. They protect against inflammatory bowel diseases, different forms of diarrhea like traveler's diarrhea, antibiotic-associated diarrhea, infectious diarrhea, all other diarrhea types. Probiotics can really support you here. They also help with relief from constipation and also, IBS symptoms. IBS is any kind of discomfort, gas, bloating, pain, cramping, problems with digestion and irregularity. All those symptoms are probably, put under the blanket of the term IBS. So probiotics really, really help with these symptoms and give a lot of relief from these conditions. Also, when we're talking about antibiotics, we get into the topic of antibiotic resistance, right? So basically, when you overuse prescription antibiotics, you can have antibiotic resistant strains of bacteria. And then we have more and more trouble getting rid of the condition that the antibiotics were originally prescribed for, or improperly using the antibiotics. If you don't take the full course and then there's some bacteria left over that have begun to get used to the antibiotic is stopped too soon, and then these bacteria start to grow. And then if the condition returns, antibiotics are indicated again. These antibiotics become resistant. These microbes become resistant to the use of the antibiotics. So taking probiotics and strengthening that microbiome can also prevent this antibiotic resistance that is often happening. You rebuild the gut bacteria and prevent all the associated gut issues that come with taking the antibiotic, right? Also, we talked a little bit about mental health. There's that whole idea of the gut brain, right? You have that gut brain connection. The microbiome produces so many different neurochemicals, right? The neurotransmitters that are used in the brain and that are really key in our moods and our feelings. Mental health disorders, are really indicated in dysbiosis when we have that imbalance in the microbiome. So really, taking probiotics can really support your mental health and be a great thing to use in adjunct with treatments for different things like mood disorders, depression, anxiety, autism spectrum disorders as well. That's another piece of that gut-brain connection that probiotics are very helpful with. Manic depressive episodes, any kind of mood disorder really can be impacted by improving the microbiome through the use of probiotics. Very interesting stuff. We talked a bit about the immune system. Many autoimmune and immune-related disorders have an inflammatory component, and they're beginning to learn through research that probiotics can help mediate this inflammation and really, really impact any autoimmune type disorders too. So that immune boosting benefit of probiotics is very, very helpful. And it also really impacts the quality of life for anybody with any kind of inflammatory disorders. Children, seniors, all populations, not just, general healthy populations, can all benefit from taking probiotics and improving that state of the microbiome. Another thing is skin, right? Healthy skin has a connection to the microbiome. There's lots of very good research that talks about, again, that inflammatory component and how it can be mediated with probiotics. Things like eczema, acne, all different types of inflammatory skin conditions can benefit by improving the state of the microbiome. Another piece of the puzzle is food allergies. Really, the first 2 years of life, they are now finding is so key in the development later on in life of food allergies. So, if you have had any kind of dysbiosis early in life, that really sets you up for the development of food allergies and food intolerances later on in life. Not to say it's permanent, but improving the microbiome later in life can also really, really improve any of this kind of food allergies that you see. I talk a lot about, it's not the food's fault. Oftentimes, like lactose intolerance, it just means we don't have the right kind of bacteria to break down the lactose in milk. So when we build the microbiome and, strengthen these populations of microbes that really break down lactose, we soon find we can start to eat dairy products. So it's very interesting to see how building the microbiome can impact any food intolerances that we have. Very good. For me, myself, I was very lactose intolerant early in my life, but after I did all the work on my gut and began to understand the microbiome role, today I can eat dairy products, no problem. They don't bother me the same way. Now, I do eat them in moderation because I feel like, any kind of past problems I might have had, if I bring dairy back to play a prominent role in my life, I worry that I may end up going back to finding intolerances again, because I know that's an area of natural weakness for me. So I still eat them in moderation, and I still work on my microbiome all the time to allow that to happen comfortably, right? Another piece is cardiovascular health, right? Blood pressure is a huge thing that's impacted by the state of your microbiome. The microbiome can help lower blood pressure. It can improve your lipid profile. It can help improve insulin resistance. It can do all sorts of things that affect your heart health, your blood pressure, and your, lipid profile, cardiovascular health in the body. Many reasons why, the health of the microbiome is so important. So I hope that gives you an idea of why looking at the microbiome and considering supplementing with probiotic foods or supplements is such an important thing to do. In this day and age, we really need to have something to mitigate the effects of the modern world that we live in, which really is not microbiome friendly, I have to say, just between the food and the water and the toxins and all the things out there. So, we have so little control over those outside influences. But if we can, take those steps to mitigate those influences by strengthening the microbiome, it really can make a huge difference in the state of our health and how we feel. So we can talk about the different types of probiotics. There is foods, and then there is supplements. So in supplements, there are so many different kinds. There's different amounts, there's different concentrations, there's different strains. But basically, it's kind of one of those things where you start slow and you build your way up. You may want to start out with a probiotic supplement that will introduce these bacteria into your body that have, 4 to 6 different strains, right? Different types of bacteria, and not too strong. CFUs, that's called colony forming units. That's the strength of a microbiome, of a probiotic supplement. So you may want to start out with, 10 million CFUs. That's on the lower end, and work your way up to 50 billion or 200 billion. There's all sorts of different strengths, but I like to say start slow, let your body adapt, and you can begin to increase the strength of the probiotic supplement, and you can begin to add in new strains, right? There's a good one that I take now that's about 500 CFUs, and it's got, I think, 15 different strains. And that's kind of my maintenance probiotic that I use. Cultured coconut is another one, but that's under foods. We're going to talk about that in a minute, actually. But yeah, there's all sorts of different ones to try. So I, say start out slow, start out small, let your body generally adapt. And over time, you can get to a nice maintenance level that covers lots of strains and it's nice and strong and it just keeps you running smoothly. What else have I got here to tell you about? Taking probiotics. Yes, that's a good point. So when you take your probiotic, it's good to take it first thing in the morning before you eat your breakfast, because it kind of lets the food come down on top of that and make sure it moves through the system. You don't want your probiotic capsule to kind of be stuck behind the food in the stomach while the stomach is working to break down that food. Much of the stomach acid could kill off the probiotics if they become digested in the stomach. Really what we want is we want to see them move down into the small intestine where they can start to populate, right? And then there's no acid that's going to kill it off. They can begin to populate the gut and help move through the body in that way. And that's how you get the best effects from those probiotics. That's the way I like to do it. I kind of take them with the rest of my vitamins and then I eat my breakfast, The foods then that you can have, right? You can do the supplement in the pill form. You can add probiotic foods as well to help build up the population in your body. Probiotic foods are really fermented foods, right? We talk a lot about fermented foods in other places within the program, but fermented foods with the added probiotics are a really great addition to your diet. Some of the best foods that I know that are probiotic foods include tempeh, miso, kombucha, natto, raw cheese, kefir, probiotic yogurt, kimchi, pickles, sauerkraut. Anything that's fermented is a fermented food. And one thing I do on my personal Facebook profile is every few days I will post a different probiotic food and kind of give a little history of it and what it is and how you can use it and the different benefits. So if you're curious about any of these foods and you want some information on it, just pop over to my profile on Facebook, just my personal profile, and scroll through my posts and you'll easily see which ones are about probiotic foods and you can learn more about them there. Anybody have any questions? Of course, I'm always open to a dialogue about this stuff. It's what I love. So anybody wants to send me any messages with questions or comments, I would really love that. Would be great. One thing to keep in mind when it comes to probiotic foods, you want to make sure they're not overly processed, right? You want low sugar, no preservatives, no real extra ingredients hanging around in there. Because even if you're consuming something with lots of probiotics, it won't have the same health benefits if it's really processed and like pumped full of chemicals and additives, right? Those things are not microbiome friendly and they end up doing more harm than good. So yeah, it's really important to remember to start off slow, slowly build the microbiome. It's a delicate balance inside of us when it comes to all these microbes. You want to start off slow, bring in these new types of supplements and foods slowly, and let your body generally adapt and get used to it. But the main thing to remember is when it comes to probiotic supplements, you're not really taking these supplements and growing a new microbiome. If only it was that easy. The only thing is with these probiotic supplements, they're transient, which means you only get the benefits from these bacteria as they're passing through the body. But, they are passed through the body and they are excreted with our stool. They don't live inside us. Our microbiome population is the one that's innate to us. It lives in us. But there are ways that we can build up our own microbiome, and that is through, a good gut program. Taking these probiotic foods and supplements kind of sets up the right conditions inside of us for our own microbiomes to thrive and grow properly. So they do impact the population, but it's important to note that these bacteria are not going to live in us. They are just passing through. We're just getting their benefits as they move through us. The real way to have a healthy, strong, innate microbiome that is ours and is living and growing inside of us is to, look at the diet, look at all those holistic factors that impact your microbiome and really start to improve those over time so that our internal conditions support our own healthy growing microbiome. So I hope that was interesting to you and you got a lot out of it. Gut health is my jam. The microbiome is one of the things that I find the most interesting and its role it plays in our gut health. So, take care of your microbiome. It's so important. It impacts how you feel, how you look, your thoughts and your emotions. It impacts all aspects of your health. And it's probably, in my opinion, one of the most important things you can look after for your health and your well-being. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much. See you soon.